Jace Callan hated dead ships. They were too quiet, too still. It made his skin crawl. He moved carefully through the abandoned slaver vessel, his boots making soft thuds on the metal floor. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows in the empty halls. It looked like the ship had been attacked. Blaster burns scared the walls, and a few bodies lay slumped over in the corridors. Jace ignored them. He wasn't here for a fight. He was here for salvage. His ship, the Iron Stray, was docked outside, ready to haul anything valuable. He had already found some decent loot, fuel cells, a few working weapons, and a crate of medical supplies that would sell well in the outer colonies. But as he stepped into the ship's lower decks, his gut told him there was something else here. Something important. Then he heard it, a faint click. A sound too precise, too sharp to be random. He froze, his hand hovering over his sidearm. His eyes scanned the darkness. Nothing moved, but his instincts screamed at him to be careful. He followed the sound, his heartbeat steady but alert. At the end of the corridor, he found a heavy, reinforced door. A high-security lock was attached to it, the kind used for high-value cargo. That got his attention. Slavers didn't waste security on just anything. Jace pulled a hacking device from his belt, hooked it up to the lock, and waited as the device did its work. A few seconds later, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was small, dimly lit, and nearly empty. Except for her. She sat in the center of the room, her wrists and ankles bound with energy cuffs. Silver chains ran from the cuffs to the walls, glowing faintly. Even in the poor lighting, Jace could see she was not human. Her skin shimmered like polished metal, a soft silver hue that shifted slightly as she moved. Her long, flowing black hair cascaded down her back, and her violet eyes locked onto him with an expression he couldn't read, fear, hope, or something else entirely. Jace frowned. He had seen plenty of alien species before, but not like this. She was unique. "You understand me?" he asked cautiously. The woman hesitated, then gave a small nod. Jace sighed. He hadn't planned on rescuing anyone today. But he couldn't just leave her here. He stepped forward, pulling a small tool from his belt to disable the energy cuffs. As he worked, she finally spoke, her voice soft but urgent. "You should not be here." Jace smirked. "Yeah, I get that a lot." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You don't understand. He will come for me." Something about the way she said it sent a chill down his spine, but he shrugged it off. He had dealt with dangerous people before. He wasn't scared of some slaver's revenge. The cuffs released with a quiet beep, and she slumped forward slightly, rubbing her wrists. Jace extended a hand to help her up. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. Nixara. That name felt important, though Jace couldn't say why. "All right, Nixara," he said. "Let's get out of here." But as he led her out of the cell, the ship's warning systems suddenly blared to life. A red light flashed on the walls. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the halls. "A.L. Eart. Ship HASB and BOREACGT. Warning, CNT to Dominion forces." Jace's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a random slaver ship. And Nixara wasn't just any prisoner. He had no idea what he had just done. Jace Callan gripped the controls of the Iron Stray, his knuckles white, as he pulled the ship into a hard turn. Red warning lights flashed across the cockpit, alarms screaming in his ears. The Dominion had found them fast. Too fast. He didn't know what Nixara was worth to them, but judging by the 4 warships chasing him through the void, she was more than just another runaway slave. The comm system crackled to life, and a deep guttural voice growled through the speakers. "Surrender the girl, human. There is nowhere to run." Jace smirked despite the situation. They always said that, and yet he was still here. He flicked a switch, cutting off the transmission. "Sorry, boys, but I think I'll pass on that offer." A plasma blast streaked past the ship, close enough to make the hull shudder. Jace cursed under his breath. The Iron Stray was fast, but it wasn't built for full-on dogfights against Dominion warships. He needed a plan. Now. Nyxera stood behind him, gripping the back of his chair. She was calm, too calm. Her violet eyes watched the warships on the screen. Unreadable. "You don't seem scared," Jace muttered, yanking the controls into another evasive maneuver. "I knew they would come," she said softly. "Valor does not let what belongs to him slip away." Jace didn't like how she said that. Belongs, like she had no choice in the matter. Well, he's about to be real disappointed. He pushed the engines to their limit, diving toward a nearby asteroid belt. If he could lose them in the debris field, he might have a shot. But as he approached, a new warning flashed across the screen. A Dominion blockade had already formed ahead. They weren't just chasing him. They had planned for this. Jace clenched his jaw. He should have known. No slaver ship had security that heavy unless its cargo was important. And Nyxera, she was more than important. She was the kind of cargo people killed for. "What exactly did I steal?" he asked, glancing at her. She hesitated. "Something that cannot be replaced." That didn't help. Jace cursed again and flipped a switch, engaging the ship's cloaking field. It wouldn't last long, maybe a few minutes, but it was enough. The Stray shimmered and vanished just before the Dominion ships locked onto them. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. Then the warships hesitated, scanning the area. Jace exhaled. "That'll buy us time." Nyxera's gaze remained locked on the screen. Not enough. As if on cue, the enemy ships spread out, forming a net. They were smart. They knew he couldn't stay cloaked forever. Jace gritted his teeth. His only chance was to outrun them to the nearest neutral colony. He punched in the coordinates for Haven 7, a lawless station where Dominion forces had no official authority. If he could make it there, he might have a chance to regroup. "Hold on," he warned, pushing the engines beyond safe levels. The Stray shot forward, breaking through the blockade just as the cloak failed. Red targeting locks immediately flashed on the screen. The Dominion ships opened fire. Blaster fire rained down, shaking the ship violently. Sparks flew as a console exploded behind them. Nyxera stumbled but caught herself. "We won't make it," she said. Jace grinned despite the chaos. "You've never seen me fly." He jerked the ship into a tight barrel roll, dodging incoming fire. The Stray weaved through the enemy formation, slipping through the gaps before they could close in. One of the warships tried to block their path, but Jace twisted the controls at the last second, skimming just beneath the massive vessel's hull. For a moment, it seemed impossible. Then, boom. A shockwave rocked them as two Dominion ships collided in the confusion. Jace whooped. That's what happens when you fly like amateurs. Nyxera, however, didn't look relieved. "They will not stop." Jace's grin faded. He knew she was right. This wasn't over. Not even close. As the Iron Stray broke free into open space, he exhaled and muttered to himself, "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" Jace Callan had been in trouble before. He had been chased, shot at, and nearly blown to pieces more times than he could count. But this was different. The bounty on his head wasn't from some low-level crime lord or a corrupt official. No, this time it came straight from Valor Xis, ruler of the Selkar Dominion, a tyrant feared across the galaxy. And Jace had no idea why. He sat in the cockpit of the Iron Stray, staring at the bounty alert flashing on the screen. His name, his ship, his face, all listed as kill on sight. The price on his head was so high that even people who owed him favors would turn him in without blinking. Nyxera stood beside him, silent as ever, her violet eyes unreadable. She had known this would happen. She had warned him. Jace sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right, Nyxera, time to be honest with me. Why does Valor want you back so badly? And don't give me any vague answers this time." She hesitated, then finally spoke. I was his most valuable possession. Jace frowned. You mean as a slave? She shook her head. As a weapon. Jace didn't like the sound of that. Explain. Before she could answer, the ship's proximity alarm blared. A cold feeling crept up Jace's spine. Something big was coming. He turned to the scanners, and his stomach dropped. A Selkar warship had just entered the system. Not just any warship. A Hunter-class dreadnought. And at its helm was Commander Soreth Vek. Jace had heard of Vek before. A brutal enforcer of Vaylor's will. A towering reptilian warrior, bio-augmented for speed and precision, with claws sharp enough to tear through reinforced armor. The Dominion didn't send Soreth Vek after people unless they wanted them dead in the most painful way possible. Jace muttered a curse under his breath. We have a problem. Nyxura stepped forward, her expression darkening. No, we have a predator. The comm system crackled to life, and a low, gravelly voice filled the cockpit. Human. Jace swallowed hard. The voice was calm. Too calm. You have something that belongs to my master. Turn over the girl, and I will allow you a swift death. Resist, and I will make you beg for one. Jace exhaled sharply. Wow, you're really bad at negotiations. Vek chuckled, a deep, unsettling sound. You mistake this for a negotiation. The warship fired. A blast of crimson energy surged toward them. Jace yanked the controls, barely dodging as the energy wave grazed the ship's shields. The iron stray shook violently, alarms blaring. Jace clenched his jaw. Running wasn't an option. The dreadnought would outrun him in open space. He needed to hide. His eyes darted to the nearby asteroid field. It was dense, unstable, a death trap for anyone reckless enough to enter. Perfect. Jace slammed the throttle. The stray lurched forward, diving straight into the chaos of tumbling rocks. Behind them, the dreadnought hesitated only for a moment before following. Nyxura tightened her grip on the back of his seat. Are you insane? Probably, Jace muttered. But I'm also still alive, so let's hope the trend continues. The ship weaved through the debris, dodging jagged asteroids that spun unpredictably. The dreadnought couldn't maneuver as easily, but its weapons didn't need precision. A single well-placed blast could collapse an entire section of the field and trap them inside. A sudden shockwave rattled the ship. One of the asteroids behind them exploded, sending shrapnel flying in all directions. Jace gritted his teeth. Okay, new plan. We need a way out of this mess. Nyxura suddenly placed a hand on his shoulder. Trust me. Before he could ask what she meant, she closed her eyes, and the ship's console flickered. For a brief second, Jace felt something strange in the air, a pulse of energy, a whisper in the static. Then, without warning, the asteroid field shifted. Two massive rocks collided behind them, creating a shockwave that slammed into the dreadnought. Jace's eyes widened. What the hell did you just do? Nyxura opened her eyes slowly, breathing heavily. I made a choice. Behind them, the warship reeled from the impact, struggling to stabilize. Jace didn't waste the opportunity. He pushed the engines to max, escaping the field just as another asteroid crashed into the dreadnought's hull. The comm crackled once more. Vek's voice, filled with icy fury, growled. Run while you can, human. You only delay the inevitable. Jace cut the signal and exhaled. His heart was still racing, but they were alive. For now, he turned to Nyxura, who looked both exhausted and strangely calm. We need to talk, Jace said. Now. She nodded. Yes, we do. And deep down, Jace knew. Whatever she told him next was going to change everything. Jace Callan sat in the dimly lit cockpit of the Iron Stray, his fingers drumming against the console. His ship was out of immediate danger, floating in the silent void of space, but his mind was anything but calm. Across from him, Nyxura sat with her hands folded in her lap, her violet eyes watching him. She looked exhausted. Whatever she had done in the asteroid field had drained her. But Jace needed answers, and he needed them now. "All right," he said, exhaling sharply. "Time to stop with the cryptic nonsense. Nyxura. Who? What? Are you?" She hesitated, then looked away. "You will not like the answer." Jace let out a dry laugh. "I'm already on the run from the Dominion. Got a bounty high enough to turn my own friends against me, and nearly got blasted to dust by a psycho lizard man. Surprise me." Nyxura was silent for a moment. Then she finally spoke. "I was created." Jace blinked. "Created." She nodded. "Not born. Not like you. The Dominion designed me, engineered me, to be their perfect weapon." Jace frowned. He had seen augmented soldiers before. Cybernetic mercenaries, gene-modded assassins. But Nyxura wasn't like that. She wasn't a machine. She wasn't some lab-grown monster. "You don't look like a weapon," he muttered. Nyxura gave a small, almost bitter smile. "That is the point." She held up her hand, palm facing upward. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the air around it began to shimmer. The space above her skin rippled like water. Jace felt a strange pressure in the room, as if reality itself had bent slightly. Then, with a soft pulse, the console beside him flickered, not from damage, but from something else. For a split second, the ship's entire system recognized a new presence, something neither artificial nor organic, something in between. Then the pulse faded, and everything returned to normal. Jace swallowed. What the hell was that? "My gift," she said softly, "or my curse, depending on who you ask." Jace leaned back, trying to process what he had just seen. "So let me get this straight. The Dominion built you to, what? Control machines?" Nyxura shook her head. "No, to control energy itself." Jace stared at her. "That's not possible." Nyxura met his gaze. "You saw it yourself." Jace had no argument for that. He had seen a lot of strange things in the galaxy, but this was something else, something dangerous. He ran a hand through his hair. "All right, let's assume I believe you. Why the hell were you locked up? If you're so valuable, why wasn't Valor using you?" Nyxura's expression darkened. "Because I refused." Jace frowned. "Refused what?" Her jaw tightened. "To burn entire planets." A chill ran through him. "The Dominion didn't want a soldier," she continued, her voice quiet but firm. "They wanted a force of destruction, something unstoppable. But I would not be their executioner, so Valor had me imprisoned. He planned to break me, to erase my mind until I became what he wanted." Jace felt a knot in his stomach. He had dealt with slavers before, seen the cruelty of the Dominion. But this was beyond monstrous. He shook his head. "So when I broke you out, I didn't just steal a slave. I stole their deadliest weapon." Nyxura nodded. "Yes." Jace let out a long breath. No wonder Valor sent his attack dog after us. A heavy silence settled between them. Jace knew what this meant. The bounty on his head wasn't just about money anymore. The entire Dominion would be after them now. He glanced at Nyxura. "Can you control it? This power of yours?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not fully. I was still learning before they locked me away. But if I don't use it carefully, I could lose control." Jace didn't like the sound of that. He had seen what uncontrolled power could do. And if Nyxura was even half as powerful as the Dominion believed, he exhaled sharply. "Well, that's just fantastic." Before Nyxura could respond, the ship's comm system suddenly crackled to life. A new voice, sharp and cold, filled the cockpit. "Jace Callan." Jace stiffened. He knew that voice. Nyxura tensed beside him. "Who is that?" Jace's grip on the console tightened. "Captain Orion Vale. A ruthless bounty hunter. The kind who never failed to bring in his target. You're worth a fortune now. Orion continued, his tone almost amused. And I never ignore an opportunity for profit. Jace cursed under his breath. First the Dominion, now this guy. Could this day get any worse? Nyxara turned to him, her eyes steady. What do we do? Jace cracked his knuckles, forcing a grin. We do what we do best. Nyxara raised an eyebrow. Which is? Jace flipped several switches on the control panel, preparing for another high-speed escape. We run. Jace Callan didn't need to see Captain Orion Vale's ship to know it was already on their tail. The bounty hunter never wasted time, never played games. The second his voice came over the comm, Jace knew they had minutes, maybe seconds, before things got bad. And Jace was already tired of bad days. He gripped the controls of the Iron Stray, flipping the ship into a hard roll as blaster fires streaked past them. Of course, he starts shooting immediately, Jace muttered, twisting the ship through a chaotic dance of dodges. No surrender now, no warnings, just straight to murder. Nyxara sat beside him, her eyes locked on the radar. Is that normal? For Vala? Absolutely. Another blast roared past them, narrowly missing the left thruster. The impact shook the ship violently. Shields at 60%, Nyxara warned. Jace gritted his teeth. Not great. Is there a plan? Jace sighed. Survive. Nyxara gave him a flat look. That is not a plan. Okay, step 1. Don't die. Step 2. Get away. Step 3. The ship lurched hard as another hit landed, throwing sparks from the console. Nyxara's voice was deadpan. Step 3. Step 3 is a work in progress. Behind them, Vale's ship, the Revenant, was closing in fast. Unlike the Iron Stray, which was built for smuggling and quick getaways, the Revenant was designed for hunting. Sleek, armored, and heavily armed, it was a predator among ships. Jace knew he couldn't outgun it. Outrunning it wasn't likely either. That left outsmarting it. His eyes flicked to the scanner. A small, uncharted moon lay ahead, its surface a maze of jagged rock formations and deep canyons. Jace grinned. There's our exit. Nyxara glanced at the moon, then back at him. You are going to fly us into that. Oh, ye of little faith. With a sharp turn, Jace sent the ship diving toward the moon's surface. Vale followed. Jace twisted the controls, skimming low over the rocky terrain, darting between towering cliffs. Dust and debris kicked up behind them as the Revenant stayed locked on their tail. Vale's voice crackled over the comm. You can't run forever, Callan. Jace grinned. I can sure as hell try. A missile warning blared on the console. Jace's heart pounded. Oh, come on, Vale. Missiles? Really? Nyxara's eyes narrowed. We need to stop him. Great idea. You got any miracle powers left in you? She shook her head. Not at this range. If I try to interfere with his systems now, he'll detect me immediately. Jace cursed under his breath. They needed a distraction. Something big enough to force Vale to back off, even for a moment. Then he saw it. A massive canyon ahead, deeper than anything he had ever seen. A tight squeeze, even for his ship, if he timed it just right. Nyxara, hold on. She barely had time to react before Jace cut the engines for half a second, letting the ship drop like a stone. The Stray plummeted straight into the canyon, the walls barely missing its wings. At the last second, Jace reignited the thrusters, pulling into a wild, twisting maneuver through the narrow gap. Vale's ship wasn't so lucky. The Revenant tried to follow, but it was too big, too fast. At the last moment, Vale was forced to veer off, his ship scraping against the canyon wall, sparks flying from its hull. Jace whooped. Oh, that's gotta hurt. Nyxara stared at him. You are completely insane. Yep. He grinned. But we're alive, aren't we? Behind them, the Revenant pulled back, damaged but still functional. Vale wasn't out of the fight. Not yet. But for now, Jace and Nixara had bought themselves time. Jace set a course toward the nearest station. They needed repairs. They needed fuel. And most of all, they needed a new plan, because Vele wasn't the only hunter out there. Nixara looked at him, her violet eyes filled with something unreadable. "Why are you still helping me, Jace?" He glanced at her, then smirked. "Because it really pisses off powerful people." And that was always fun. Jace Callan guided the Iron Stray toward Haven 7, a lawless, floating city built into the remains of an ancient asteroid. It wasn't a place for the faint of heart. Smugglers, bounty hunters, and war criminals called it home. But it was the only place close enough for repairs. Nixara sat beside him, watching as the neon lights of the sprawling station came into view. "This place feels dangerous." Jace smirked. "That's because it is." He brought the ship into a rough landing on one of the lower docking platforms. The moment the engines powered down, a mechanical voice crackled over the speakers. "Docking fee, 3,000 credits. Pay or leave." Jace groaned. "Of course. Money first." Nixara tilted her head. "Do we have that much?" Jace hesitated. "Technically, no." She frowned. "And technically, still no." Before she could say anything else, Jace unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. "Come on. I know a guy." That sentence, Nixara was learning, usually led to trouble. The air inside Haven 7 was thick with smoke, the scent of oil, metal, and something vaguely rotten. Holographic signs flickered, advertising everything from illegal weapons to cybernetic enhancements. Music blasted from a nearby bar, mixing with the chatter of aliens from dozens of worlds. Jace led Nixara through the crowd until they reached a small repair shop tucked between two larger buildings. A heavy-set man with mechanical arms leaned over a workbench, his back turned. Jace knocked on the metal frame of the entrance. "Vigo, my favorite crook." The man turned, his cybernetic eye whirring as it adjusted focus. Then his face split into a grin. "Jace Callan. Still alive. That's unfortunate." Jace grinned. "Nice to see you too." Vigo wiped his hands on a greasy rag. "What do you need?" "Repairs. Full tune-up. And let's say a generous tab for an old friend." Vigo laughed, shaking his head. "No chance, Callan. You still owe me from the last time you dragged a burning wreck in here." Jace sighed. All right. I'll get the money." Vigo smirked. "Good, because if you don't, I'll sell your ship for scrap." Jace turned to Nixara. "Stay here. I'll handle this." She gave him a wary look. "What are you going to do?" Jace grinned. "Find a sucker." Jace moved quickly through the station, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. Then he spotted her, Kara Voss, an information broker and occasional thief. She sat in a dimly lit corner of a bar, sipping a neon blue drink. Jace slid into the seat across from her. "Kara, you look as stunning as ever." Kara smirked. "Jace, I thought you were dead." "Almost. And I'd love to stay and catch up. But I need a job. Something fast, something profitable." She raised an eyebrow. "You're desperate." "Extremely." She leaned in. "There is one job. Dangerous, but it pays well." Jace's grin faded. "Define dangerous." Kara tapped her fingers on the table. "A package. Needs to be delivered off-world. But the Dominion wants it too." Jace stiffened. "The Dominion. Not interested." Kara laughed. "That's funny, because they're already interested in you." Jace's stomach dropped. "What?" She slid a small holoprojector across the table and activated it. A wanted poster appeared, Jace's face, alongside a bounty of 500,000 credits. Jace exhaled. "Damn it." "That's not the worst part," Kara added. She swiped the hologram, revealing a second bounty. Nixara's face. 1,000,000 credits. Jace's blood ran cold. Kara tilted her head. "So, You want to tell me why the Dominion is willing to pay a fortune for your new friend? Jace clenched his jaw. No. Kara smiled. Then I'd leave now, because half this station is already thinking about cashing in. A gun cocked behind Jace's head. Starting with me. Jace froze as the cold barrel of a gun pressed against the back of his head. Kara Voss smirked, lazily swirling her drink. You're quick, Jace, but not quick enough. Jace sighed dramatically. I thought we were friends, Kara. We are, she said with a grin. Which is why I'm giving you a choice. I take you in alive, or I take you in dead. I prefer alive, less messy. Jace rolled his eyes. How thoughtful. His mind raced. He could flip the table, grab a weapon, or stall. Problem was, Kara wasn't alone. 3 armed men sat at the bar behind her, pretending not to watch. Another figure lingered near the exit. A trap. And Nixara was still waiting at the ship. If she walked into this, they'd both be dead. Jace let out a slow breath. All right. You win. Kara arched an eyebrow. That's it. No smart remarks. Jace raised his hands. I'll come quietly. She nodded at the man behind him. Cuff him. The second the bounty hunter reached for his wrists, Jace moved. In a flash, he ducked left, twisting out of the way as the gun fired. The shot missed by inches, hitting the bar counter with a sizzling hiss. Jace grabbed Kara's half-finished drink and threw it in her face. She cursed, blinking away the burning alcohol, but Jace was already moving. He grabbed a chair, swinging it into the bounty hunter behind him, knocking the man back. Then he ran. Shouts erupted behind him as Kara and her goons opened fire. Jace zigzagged through the bar, flipping over tables and shoving past aliens. Bolts of plasma sizzled through the air, shattering glass and furniture. The bartender, a 4-armed reptilian, roared in fury. Take it outside, you lunatics. Jace burst through the doors of the bar and into the crowded streets of Haven 7. His heart pounded. He needed to get back to Nixara. Fast. He tapped his communicator. Nex, we have a problem. Her voice crackled through. What happened? Kara sold us out. Half the station knows about our bounties. I need you to prep the ship. We're leaving. A brief pause. Then, understood. Jace sprinted through the winding alleys, but the bounty hunters weren't far behind. He could hear Kara barking orders. Footsteps pounded after him. Suddenly, a massive robotic enforcer stepped into his path. The security droid was nearly 8 feet tall, its metallic body glowing with red warning lights. Unregistered fugitive detected. Surrender or be neutralized. Jace didn't slow down. He grabbed a nearby trash container and hurled it at the droid's face. The machine stumbled, just enough for Jace to slip past. Jace. Nixara's voice came through his earpiece again. I see you on the scanners. You have 6 people chasing you. Only 6. Jace panted. I was expecting more. They have backup waiting near the docks. Jace cursed. Figures. The ship was in sight now. The Iron Stray, sitting on its landing pad like a beacon of hope. Nixara stood at the open ramp, her violet eyes scanning the chaos. Jace pushed himself harder, dodging a plasma bolt that barely missed his shoulder. Kara's voice rang out behind him. Stop running, Jace. You can't win this. Jace didn't answer. He reached Nixara just as a bounty hunter leaped forward, trying to grab him. Nixara raised a hand, her fingers glowing with a strange energy. The bounty hunter's body froze midair, suspended as if caught in invisible chains. His eyes widened in terror. What the? Nixara flicked her wrist. The man went flying backward, crashing into a wall. Jace didn't have time to be impressed. He grabbed Nixara's hand and pulled her inside. We're leaving. Now. She sprinted to the controls while Jace sealed the hatch. The Iron Stray rumbled to life, thrusters igniting as they lifted off the platform. Kara and her bounty hunters opened fire, plasma rounds slamming into the ship's hull. Jace took the co-pilot seat. Shields active, but they won't hold if we stay. Then let's not stay. Nixora punched the throttle. The ship shot into the sky, breaking through Haven 7's airspace as warning sirens blared. Jace leaned back, breathing hard. Well, that was fun. Nixora shot him a glare. That was reckless. Jace grinned. Yeah, but we're still alive. She shook her head, but didn't argue. For now, they had escaped. But with a 1,000,000 credit bounty on Nixara's head, Jace knew the worst was yet to come. Because if the Dominion wanted her this badly, it meant they were hiding something. And Jace had just made himself their #1 enemy. The Iron Stray soared through space, its hull battered but still holding together. Jace sat at the navigation console, staring out into the cold emptiness of the stars. The ship's course was set to the outer rim, far from any law enforcement or bounty hunters. But even with the distance growing, Jace knew they weren't safe. Not yet. Where are we going? Nixora's voice cut through the silence. She was at the back of the ship, still processing the situation, her eyes darting over the ship's systems as she worked to keep things running smoothly. Jace didn't look at her, but instead gripped the edge of the console, focusing on the distant, shimmering light of the nebula in front of them. Somewhere quiet, a place no one will think to look for us. Nixora didn't say anything, but Jace could feel her unease. She had every right to feel it. Since she'd stepped onto the Iron Stray, everything had been a non-stop disaster. And now, with her bounty on her head, they were more exposed than ever. As the ship sped through the quiet dark of space, Jace finally spoke, breaking the tension that had been hanging between them. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I never figured you for a wanted fugitive." Nixora glanced up from her work, the usual mystery behind her eyes deepening. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Jace. Things I don't talk about." She paused for a moment, her gaze hardening. "But now that you're involved, you might find out more than you want." Jace didn't push her further. The tension between them was palpable, but he knew better than to press her. Secrets were dangerous, especially ones that could get them both killed. Instead, he changed the subject, trying to lighten the mood. "By the way, thanks for throwing that guy across the alley back there. I almost thought you were going to leave me to die." Nixora raised an eyebrow. "You can handle yourself, but don't get used to me saving you." She went back to the controls, fingers dancing over the console. The ship's humming filled the air, a calming sound in the midst of all the chaos. Jace let out a quiet sigh and turned his attention to the radar. The outer rim was their best chance for a little peace, but even this far from the core, danger still lurked. The space lanes were littered with pirates, mercenaries, and all sorts of unsavory characters. People who would love nothing more than to collect a big bounty. The deep silence between them stretched on, and Jace couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. That ominous sense that they were walking right into a trap. He leaned back in his seat, trying to shake the feeling. "We'll lay low for a while. Get some repairs. You can tell me what's really going on. I don't care what secret you're hiding, but I need to know why they're after you." Nixora's voice was cold as she answered, "You wouldn't understand." Jace narrowed his eyes, sensing there was more to her words than just a simple refusal. But before he could push her further, an alarm blared across the ship. "Warning. Unidentified ship approaching. Closing in fast." Jace shot to his feet, eyes immediately on the radar. "What the hell?" Nixora moved swiftly to the console. "They're not pirates," she said, her voice sharp. "I'd know that signature anywhere. It's the Dominion." Jace's blood ran cold. The Dominion. The very people who'd put the bounty on Nixora's head. They'd come to finish the job, and they weren't going to stop until she was dead. "We need to get out of here," Jace said urgently. "Now." Nixora quickly accessed the ship's weapons systems, her face a mask of concentration. "We won't outrun them, Jace. Not without serious firepower. We're going to have to fight. Jace cursed under his breath. He didn't want to fight. Not like this. Not when they had no way of knowing who was out there. But he could hear the engines of the incoming ship, and there was no time to second-guess himself. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Get the weapons online. I'll handle the flying." Nyxura nodded, her fingers moving over the controls. "Brace yourself," she warned. "This is going to get ugly." The iron stray lurched as the ship's weapons powered up. Jace's mind raced, calculating the odds. They were outnumbered, and with Nyxura's bounty still on her head, this was no longer just a fight for survival. This was about protecting secrets, secrets that the Dominion desperately wanted to uncover. And Jace had a feeling they were about to learn more than they bargained for. With the incoming ship closing in fast, Jace put his foot down on the throttle, and the iron stray shot toward the stars, preparing for the battle that would determine everything. The real fight had just begun. The iron stray shook violently as the Dominion ship fired upon them, bright pulses of energy lighting up the blackness of space. Jace gritted his teeth, his hands gripping the controls with white-knuckled intensity as he swerved the ship to the left, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. "Hold on tight," he yelled over his shoulder, his voice steady despite the chaos. Nyxura was already at the weapons console, her fingers flying across the controls as she locked on to their attackers. "I've got a lock on their engines." Preparing to fire. Her voice was calm, but Jace could hear the edge of urgency behind it. The Dominion ship wasn't huge, but it was heavily armed, a sleek black vessel designed for speed and destruction. It was gaining on them, and the pulsing lights from their weapons made it clear they weren't planning to negotiate. The moment Jace had feared had arrived. The Dominion wanted Nyxura dead, and they were willing to destroy anyone who got in their way. Jace pulled the ship into a sharp dive, weaving through a field of asteroids that drifted lazily in the outer rim. They weren't big enough to cause much damage, but they made for perfect cover. The Dominion ship, though fast, wasn't designed to navigate through such a dense field. "They're trying to follow us," Nyxura called out, her voice tight. "They're not going to stop." Jace didn't answer. Instead, he pushed the throttle forward, the ship's engines roaring as the iron stray shot toward a nearby moon. Their only hope was to lose them in the atmosphere of the planet. It had a heavy, stormy atmosphere, the kind that would scramble enemy sensors and make it impossible to track them. Jace's heart pounded in his chest as the ship dipped lower, entering the thick, swirling clouds. The stormy winds buffeted the ship, making it harder to control. Lightning flashed, illuminating the sky in a bright white burst as they plunged deeper into the chaos. "This isn't going to be easy," Nyxura muttered, locking her seatbelt tighter as the ship rocked. The Dominion ship was still hot on their tail, not giving up, not even for a moment. "They're not going to let us slip away that easily," Jace said, eyes scanning the redouts. The storm's interference was working, but not for long. Jace could see the flashing warnings on his console. They were almost out of power. If they didn't break free soon, they wouldn't have enough left to fight back. "We need to shake them off." "You ready to fight, Nyxura?" Nyxura gave a determined nod, her eyes locked on the approaching enemy ship. "Ready." Jace flipped a switch, and the cannon mounted on the ship's underbelly hummed to life. He fired, the energy bolt streaking through the clouds, slamming into the Dominion ship's hull. The explosion lit up the dark skies, but the enemy ship didn't flinch. It was still coming. "I've got one more trick," Nyxura said, her hands moving swiftly across the controls. The iron stray vanished, disappearing from the Dominion ship's sensors. Jace didn't waste a second. He brought the ship into a sharp turn, the momentum throwing them sideways, barely avoiding a fatal collision with a jagged cliffside of the moon. When the ship reappeared, it was in the perfect position to launch another attack. "Now," Jace shouted. Nyxura unleashed everything, and the energy beams from their cannons struck the Dominion ship with devastating force. Lights flickered on the enemy vessel, and for a moment, it looked like they were going to break through. But the ship wasn't done yet. The Dominion retaliated with a missile barrage, and Jace had to swerve quickly again, narrowly missing the exploding missiles. The intensity of the battle felt like it would never end, but Jace refused to give in. He wouldn't let them win. "We're almost there," Nixara called out, her fingers flying across the console. "I've got a weakness in their shields. One more shot, and we can bring them down." Jace took a deep breath, his heart pounding. This was it, their last chance. He locked the ship's trajectory and aimed directly for the enemy's exposed side. As the Dominion ship fired again, Jace pushed the lever forward, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline. "Fire." Nixara pressed the button, and the blast shot forward. It hit the Dominion ship with perfect precision, breaching its shields and tearing into its core. The enemy ship erupted in a ball of fire, pieces of debris scattering across space. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the storm surrounding them seemed to calm, and the iron stray flew free. Jace leaned back, letting out a long breath. They had done it. They had won. But as he glanced over at Nixara, he couldn't shake the feeling that this victory had come with a price. The Dominion might be gone for now, but they would come back. Nixara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "That's not the end, Jace. They'll never stop looking for me." Jace met her gaze. "Then we keep moving. Together."